The Redline Narratives Podcast is your go-to for understanding how Boston's infrastructure plans impact all of us. We discuss everything from zoning to community planning, complicated engineering terms, ties to historical redlining and urban renewal, and even the cultural implications of development. It's all about making sense of complex topics and ensuring that you have an informed voice in these changes. We'll be having special guests, city officials, experts, you name it, in order to help us answer the questions so we can make positive changes in our community. So let's lock in and hit these streets. Welcome. Welcome, everyone. Happy Holy Week Uprising. I'm your host, Marlon Solomon. You are at the Redline Narratives Podcast. Very excited to have you all here today. Welcome to 57 After Martin, where we recognize the 57th anniversary after his death. And today is actually a very special day because today is the 57th anniversary of the passing of the Fair Housing Act of 1968. It was passed on April 11th, and that passing allowed us to end segregation. Oh my goodness, I had to press a button right there, so I was a little off. But that's what we're going to be doing today, and we have a lovely slide deck planned for you. It's really exciting, when you get to share and you get to put something together that's going to add to the history, add to the culture of the city I love, Boston. You know what's up? So we're going to be talking about the Legacy of Exclusion. But before we get started, would you help me hit the like? It helps everybody know about this Black history that we're doing here. So without further ado, let's hit it. All right. So before we get, you need to realize that next week, Saturday, is the big event. Doing a fundraiser for the organization, but we're showing the documentary. We have a tour by my main man, Colin Knight, of Live Like a Local Tour. We're going to have discussion, food from Papa B's. What else do you need? So hope to see you Saturday the 19th at the historic Wally's Jazz Cafe for a great afternoon. So I hope to see you all there. And so this is all about Holy Week Uprising, right? It's been a week since we did our first podcast for the 57 AM, which was called Stay Woke. And that was really just trying to bring home the message of the beloved community and the way we're going to have to realize that beloved community, which involves us working together, becoming fully realized human beings where we are expressing and free to love and do what we need to do to make our communities great. And that, my friends, is where we start this beautiful podcast, where we're now going to talk about our main man, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who came to Boston about 1951 in September, and he started at BU. He graduated with his PhD in 1955, and when he came, he's coming here to grow, to learn. He's learning about the churches. He meets his wife at the Conservatory of Music here in Boston, Coretta, and they met, and he was preaching at the 12th Street Baptist Church. No longer there now, and we'll get to that, but right there in Roxbury. So you see, his life and even where he lived, played a big part in his role and where he lived. He lived right down the street from Wally's at 395 Mass Ave, and he was part of the community. He loved the community. He was a person who made sure that his presence was felt. He led a march April 22nd, I believe 1965, from the Roxbury YMCA to the Boston Common. Here we have some pictures here. And, ironically, years later, the Embrace statue is in the Boston Common, really close to where he spoke. So it just kind of brings it home how important the Reverend Dr. Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. is to Boston. He's part of this story. So, Holy Week Uprising. So what's all this Holy Week Uprising about? It's about, so he passed on April 4th, right? You can see the picture there, the historic picture of him at the Lorraine Motel. And, of course, the whole United States of America, especially the African American community, was just devastated. I mean, you have to understand, what was achieved a few years later with the Civil Rights Act of 1964, with the Voting Rights of 1965, right? These were huge victories. And, to be honest, people don't realize this, but in 1963, people didn't, it was like, are you serious? You really think this could actually happen? Right? So people need to understand it wasn't like inevitable. It took a lot of sacrifice and a lot of work and a lot of hope, a lot of togetherness, a lot of communities coming together, working within the church infrastructure to host meetings, to plan, to feed, to educate. So much went on around the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. In fact, he has to be one of the most influential Christians, and this church movement was dear to the soul. Think about it. The whole country coming together to get civil rights. Black folks, African Americans working together, right? You can't get one, a better story than that. But so when he died, oh my God, it is just, you can't even begin, I can't even begin to understand. I've heard what my mom said, I've heard, things from other people, and I get it, but I don't think you can really understand until you live it, right? So this picture on the top right, that's actually a picture of Grove Hall. So after that day, he died, the whole place goes up. In fact, James Brown was in town. I didn't mean to rhyme, y'all, but it happened. So James Brown, he's supposed to be performing, I think, on the 5th of April. And he, when him and Mayor White, had to get together, they put up like a big kind of, not a jumbotron, but I guess the equivalent of the time in Franklin Park, I think by White Stadium. And they, they're telling, it was a time where they needed to calm people down. And it's much because of this. So, of course, April 11th. So people don't really know a lot about this history. So, and this is, nobody's condemning, nobody's encouraging violence. But I will say that at such a pivotal moment, this is the turning point for African American in history, where we're on the upward spiral and all this mess happens, and then, our leader is assassinated. And then before you know it, things start going downhill. But one of the things that happens as a result of his death, people don't realize the Reverend Doctor never got to actually experience a legally unsegregated America. He died. In fact, I would actually say that it was, and well, it's pretty much proven. His death was what caused the end of segregation to happen, at least at that point in time. So at the time, in Congress, the Fair Housing Act was stalled in the Congress. And with the Fair Housing Act being stalled in the Congress, there was really not much that was going to happen. But his death and then the uprisings, that is called Holy Week Uprising because it was around Easter when it was going to happen. So it was during the Holy Week. And that pressure now pushed the Congress to pass the law, and President Lyndon Johnson signed it on April 11, 1968, 57 years ago today. And it's so pivotal to understand why this is so important. You see, the other two civil rights acts weren't really like physical. These were, kind of like, ideological civil rights. You're a human being and you're deserving of all. I mean, it kind of says a lot about a country that needs to pass legislation for that to be reflected in laws. People couldn't just do it, because they wanted to, because they have good hearts, right? But that's the way it went down, right? But this was the first law that now had to do with physical space. What is segregation if it isn't separating people physically? So this was actually hardcore, uh, the real hardcore law that was passed. It had to do with infrastructure, a lot of money, and physical space, right? While not saying the others aren't important, of course they're important. But we're talking about this the first time. I think the good Reverend said this is the first time they really have to say something. They have to really pay something. And this is what this is about. Now, what segregation was so important because you see, this map represents all the communities that were redlined and destroyed by highways and city expansions, right? And without that law, this could have continued to happen. But there's a trick to it. While the law was outlawed, right? No more segregation, you can't separate anyone, right? The issue and the legacy of exclusion is based in the fact that the communities were already built. And that is the secret of redlining that people don't really kind of grasp. And that is that if you build a road in, let's say, 1630, that road would be designed according to the laws of the time. It's called, little codes that they say that says the road can be this wide and, it can be this long and you can have this amount of sidewalk and all those kind of things. So once they say, okay, this is the way you're supposed to do it, once you build it, literally, the law is now in stone. Think of the North End with the small, tiny roads. Those roads, and we always make the joke, oh, those in Boston, because those roads, we say that they're horse paths, right? For carts and buggies and trolleys, right? And that is actually true. And they stay that way. So the law of back then still affects us today, and that's what happened today. And that's why we're going to talk about the legacy of exclusion, because this map, when I first saw it, I was so weak, y'all, because it really just, to me, just said, wow, look how systemic this was, that the whole America, all at the same time, had these communities leveled to the ground, which is why after the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Act and all these things, you did not see a big influx of like senators and congressmen into the thing, because guess what? The districts were already destroyed. And that is a very key point. So these communities that fought for civil rights actually never got to vote in the way that they were when they were fighting for civil rights. And that's a very important thing. That's how much effect this has. So now, one of the things I'm very, 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 very adamant about now is I'm really big anti-displacement advocate, right? And the reason why is because in Boston, right, dig this, that African Americans are literally displaced every 60 years or so. And that part really gets to me because it just means it's systemic, that after every 60 years, the city grows and then we're put that, we that were on the outskirts have to, we're now in the inskirts, not that that's a real word in that or context of that word, but now we're in a situation where, we have to be pushed out and displaced. And that displacement, my brothers and sisters, is the primary cause of any inadequacies, any disparities, right? You say, what do you mean by that? Well, I mean, when we talk of intergenerational wealth, but that really means staying in place so you can give it to somebody. How are you going to give it to the next generation if it's level to the ground, right? And then we talk of, I mean, people don't realize that these were actual real communities. You think of Black Wall Street, there were all that last map I showed you, these are all Black Wall Streets. They're all part of the Chitin Circuit, which is a network of like music venues that span the whole across America and is credited for the dissemination of jazz music all across the lands with the Great Migrations and all. But it starts in Boston because Boston is old, and in fact, it starts in Boston in 1638 when African Americans were brought over on a ship called the Desire. They were brought to as and formerly enslaved Africans, and this is where well, obviously it gets ugly, but that's actually the first displacement. The first displacement was being displaced from our motherland of Africa, and that's when this story started, right? I know we say 1619, but Boston history with African Americans starts in 1638. I found some great stuff here. You see that that's actually a clipping from a newspaper from I think 17. I can't remember, but a 17 like 50 something, and it says a parcel of likely Negroes of both sexes, so a man and woman of. You have to remember this is back in almost the colonial times, where they speak like hark ye, hither there in Shakespearean. So they said a parcel of likely Negroes of both sexes, just imported. Just look at the words in the sloop Speedwell, William Dignian Maffer, lying at the upper end of the Long Wharf. So they would just basically sell them on the Long Wharf, which is kind of really close. You can see that picture there of Faneuil Hall, and that starts this, the story of African Americans, right? After a while, the African Americans actually have a little settlement called the New Guinea Settlement. This was in the North End. It's kind of right here by Copp's Hill Cemetery. You can see the burial ground there. And this, it was kind of over here. That's like the Bill Russell Bridge. It's no longer, I got to update this picture, y'all. So this is the Bill Russell Bridge. It's like where the Celtics play. And then this, my brothers and sisters, is where the first free settlement of African Americans in Boston, and actually it is believed to be the first free settlement of African Americans in the American colonies. So in America, think about that, y'all. There was once a time where there was no place in the whole America where African Americans could gather and live in community. So, and this happens, like I said, in the 1700s or so. So you're talking about literally like 100 years or so, of 100 years plus of African Americans. Not a single one of us, not, well, maybe one or two people are free, but we're not talking about people who, like a community where you can live and stand proud. So this, that is something that needs to be talked about, right? Now, African Americans now stayed in this community and they did so much, right? And this is the amazing thing about African Americans, that despite it all, there's just something about us. And I use the term African American because, well, I always want to make sure that we never bring down the memory of our ancestors that made it across the transatlantic slave trade, and they gave their life. Some of them jumped off the ship. Some of them fought in revolt. Many died. I mean, not even the ones that died. Even and there's an argument to be said that maybe they were the lucky ones, because to live in slavery, oh my God! Like, I mean, it's just I can't even imagine. But nonetheless, during the Revolutionary War in 1776, you never know that it was started. There's this right here is Crispus Attucks, right? Who is credited? They said the first to defy, the first to deny, with and that's this brawl right here that you can see here, and that's Crispus Attucks getting killed by the British colonialists, right? This is the State House, and he was one of the first, and he got shot and he got killed. So the first to die in the Revolutionary War. Imagine that, right? In 17th, when most of African Americans are still enslaved. And that kind of tells you the kind of place Boston was back then, right? Boston, for all its failures, it's not perfect. I'm not going to give it that. But I will say that when you do the research, you find out that there was a strong abolition movement. And in fact, we've always been the most progressive, the first to ban, one of the first to ban slavery in the United States. And we were the seat of power for the British colonials. So for us to have African Americans, really making a contribution, and these are just the big ones that we know. We all know the deal. There must have been loads of contributions of African Americans that have all been lost to time. All these cultural strength of our ancestors that we're meant to know, and it's meant to inspire us and push us forward. I always talk about generational wealth starts with generational knowledge. And unfortunately, it takes more than one generation. It takes more than one generation to gain that knowledge. So we want to big up Crispus Attucks. And then you see we have like Phyllis Wheatley, the lady there, and she's the first black woman to write a book in the United States. And we have Prince Hall. Oh my God, Prince Hall is a legend in Boston. He started the Mason Lodge, the Grand Lodge Masons, and they're still here today. I was actually at a James Brown event in Grove Hall, where they were celebrating, what I said about James Brown helping the day James Brown saved Boston. So they were doing an event there, and I was there. So, but it was in the Prince Hall Grand Lodge, and so Prince Hall, of course, is the Grand Lodges are all over the United States, and one thing you'll notice about what we're saying here, and even there's even more with, is that African Americans were actually very educated, right? If people are creating Prince Hall, I think was with George Washington, and like we had like very educated, accomplished people. Phyllis Wheatley, she wrote a book, right? There's another story. I think we'll have a little bit of it later, where here we go. It's his name is Robert Roberts, and he writes this book about being a butler, right? And the best ways to be a butler. And he died with apparently like $40,000 in his account. Now, for an African American to have that much money back then, it sounds like not a lot of money now, but back then that's like some millions today. So also, and this is when they move. Okay, so the Irish, right? The Irish, right? The Irish and a lot of European immigrants start moving into Boston. Back then, Boston was like a little popsicle, right? It wasn't like as big as filled in. South Bay and Back Bay were all water, all right? So you now have this little space, and that's what African Americans were. So when the North End starts getting filled with European immigrants, the second displacement for African Americans happens. All right, so the first one is the transatlantic enslavement from Africa. They now move to the North End. I mean, they move to the West End from the North End, right? And that's the second displacement, right? And this is, so now whatever was there, I mean, if you go to the North End where I showed you, there's no sign, there's no cultural landmark, no cultural infrastructure, no statues, no plaques, no nothing, right? About the literal first free African American community in the United States of America, which was, like I said, right here, and there's no place, zero. Think about that, okay? So there's nothing that you're transferring, right? Now, well, from now, of course, the people in the West End transferred, but this is how the story goes. That's the legacy of exclusion that we're talking about, all right? So, and a lot of Bostonians don't even know that. So in the West End, this is when the abolitionist movement really starts moving really strong, right? And you've got the Brahmin. Sounds like a big nerd. It is. So the Brahmin refers to the elite um, white people that were here at the time. Okay, so this isn't at this point. White people refers to the people like John Quincy Adams, Coolidge, the people that won the Revolutionary War, fighting with Prince Hall, George Washington. Those are the Brahmin. Okay, now the Brahmin are the basically some of the major architects behind the abolitionist movement. Okay, they're the ones, doing the protests, basically the white liberals of today, right? And they believe in, they're trying to get, they want slavery to be gone. They're listening to Frederick Douglass, as you can see this picture of Frederick Douglass with Abraham Lincoln and the fugitive slave law. These Boston is now in the lead, and there's this real kindred. Remember, at this point, African Americans are educated for the most part. If you live in Massachusetts, the law says you have to be educated. And we're like, when you think of Horace Mann and the first public schools and all this other stuff. So it was really big and very progressive, obviously, for the time. Um, and you know but then like the European immigrants are moving in and they're filling up not even just the north end, they're coming into the west end, and the west end now becomes this beautiful multicultural tapestry built from all the trade of the Boston Harbor. It's just this, they used to actually call it the United Nations. And so we're talking now, like, so the New Guinea settlement, that was about 1850 or so. And then by the 1900s, they're in the West, they're staying there into the West End, right? So they moved from the North End to the West End about 1850. Gosh, I don't know why I say something. Getting these numbers mixed up, y'all. 1850 or so, and they moved to the West End, right? So now they're in the West End, and they're, and of course the place is filling up with people, like I said, Jewish people. There are like 55 synagogues, right? They're Polish people, Indians, Chinese, Asian, whatever, African American, people from the Caribbean. It's just everybody's there, okay? And these people are so close knit that, I kid you not, people were actually eating dinners in other people's house. So today you'll eat at an African American home. Tomorrow you'll eat at a Jewish home. The next day you'll eat at an Italian home. I'm not kidding you. And that's how close the everything was. So you're going like, how did all this craziness come out with segregation and all this if people were so close in the 1900s? Well, a lot has to do with the introduction of the Irish and the Great Migrations. But I call it the Great Escape. Please don't call it the Great Migration around me. But lo and behold, these communities were just thriving. So they're living on the north slope of Beacon Hill, where Joy Street is. And that's kind of why we have the name New Guinea Joy. That's the tour, y'all, on the left-hand side. So we got a tour that we're working on. So y'all make sure that y'all hit us up, African American Academy. You know what to do. Hit the like, so go visit our link tree. You can see the thing on the ticker below, right? And we got a tour, and this tour, when you go to the Joy Street, when you go up the slope to Joy, you start realizing, oh my God, these communities that people owned homes and they lived and they were happy and they thrived, right? And they were in this community while the big group of them left in the 1910s, 1900s, 1910s. They moved to Lower Roxbury and South End. There were still people there, a sizable community up to into the 1950s. Imagine that. Okay? Once again, we're talking about the legacy of exclusion. So you're now there, and of course the gentrification happens. The West End. Before I go to that, I just want to talk about the Freedom Trail. And a lot to do with that. This is Joy Street. This is the African Meeting House, and this is an illustration of it back in the day. This is where Harriet Tubman was doing the Underground Railroad, and this is where I talk about the Underground Railroad and the third displacement. Because remember, I said the Irish were coming, but there was also this Underground Railroad of African Americans coming in from the South, right? So that's the third displacement. Okay, so we've gone, was that the third displacement? Hold on. We've gone from the Africa, first displacement, North End, second displacement, West End, right, is the third displacement. Sorry, no, so the Underground Railroad is the third displacement, right? Because people are coming in all during this time. And I know that people want to look at it as, oh, it's a display, is it really displacement? Yes, people, you think all African Americans that were enslaved in the South, you think that they would have wanted to get out of there? So it's a displacement, but they are being fought. Remember, the fugitive slave law was to get people to come back, right? Even during the Great Escapes, right? During the 40s, the 1910s and 30s and 40s and 50s. They were really, because remember, they needed these African Americans to be sharecroppers. So there was a whole thing there. But we know we have to give respect to Harriet Tubman, who was there, who was running the Underground Railroad. She has a big statue here in Boston. I mean, these are some nice illustration of the Brahmin and the African Americans, and the abolitionist movement. The Emancipator is, a news publication that was done. This is Eliza Mahoney, the first black nurse that studied here and lived in the West End in Boston. Now, actually, there's a great story behind this. So earlier on in the West End, and there was a lady by the name of Rebecca Lee Crumpler, who is credited being the first African American female doctor in the United States. But because of when she was born, like in the 1850s, there was no photographs of her. So they actually is no photographs. So there's actually a weird story where because Mahoney is the first nurse and Rebecca Lee Crumpler is the first doctor, and that has gotten confused over time. And this is where we cover the legacy of exclusion. So because there's no record, there's a lot of, like, if you go online, you might see that this picture is, they will say that she's Rebecca Lee Crumpler, but she's not. There's no picture of Rebecca Lee Crumpler. All right. Now, in the late 50s, this is when the story of the West End African Americans changes, right? Remember, okay? So, and of course, I have to give one of the legends of the West End, the Boston Celtics legend, the first African American coach in the NBA. This man was a rebel. When he retired, he made sure that the whole Boston Garden was empty because there were a lot of racist people always throwing slurs. He didn't want him to mess his day. He was a leader in the community. He was friends with everyone. And of course, the winningest American athlete in any sport. He has the most chips, right? And this is the beauty of Boston. Remember, like I said, so you're seeing like all this great African American history. But guess what? Right in front of the Celtics, there is no image or cultural infrastructure statue of the great Bill Russell. And I know people will say, okay, well, even Red is not there. Red Auerbach, who is our esteemed coach, who should be credited with during the finals. He just quits all of a sudden and then says, you know what, Bill Russell, you're the first head coach. So the first head coach, if you notice how that is, he had to be a player coach before he could get to be. Isn't that, see, you can't just go there. They gotta, so I just wanted to pick up Bill Russell and, give his respect. And of course, the new bridge that's right there is called the Bill Russell Bridge. So really great stuff. So I just wanted to also show you this iconic picture of the West End and what it looked like before. This is the West End here, right? This is Mass General. That's the Liberty Hotel or the Charles Street Jail. This is the North Slope. So this is where the African Americans would have been living at the time. So when they leveled the place during the urban renewal, known as the worst project in the history of urban renewal, I mean, honestly, guys, this is where you can see here they just leveled the whole thing. Left a few things, and that's about it. This is like the North Slope and Charles Street. So, urban renewal, and the destruction of not only African American communities, but of multicultural communities where people had already got it, what this America is really about. Coming together, it's not about race, it's about culture. And if we learn our culture and we learn other people's culture, trust me, there are a lot of great meals and a lot of great cultures, a lot of great traditions, and a lot of great things to learn. And the more you learn about others, the more you learn about yourself, right? So I think, I would like at this juncture to give the floor to um, the voice of the civil rights movement, the narrator of the civil rights movement, the documenter of the civil rights movement, the late great James Baldwin.
Boy last week, who was 16 in San Francisco, told me on television. Thank God we got him to talk. Maybe somebody will start to listen. He said, I got no country, I've got no flag. Now he's only 16 years old. And I couldn't say you do. I don't have any evidence to prove that he does. They were tearing down his house because San Francisco is engaging, as most northern cities now are engaged, in something called urban renewal, which means moving the Negroes out. It means Negro removal. That is what it means. And the federal government is an accomplice to this fact. Now we're talking about human beings. There's not such a thing as a monolithic wall or, some abstraction called the Negro problem. These are Negro boys and girls who at 16 and 17 don't believe the country means anything that it says, don't feel they have any place here, on the basis of the performance of the entire country.
Not everything can be changed unless you face it to change it. And that's just how it is. And one of the things is that when you want to change it, you got to know what you're changing. And to be honest, my brothers and sisters, when you consider that all our cultural spaces were destroyed in the 1960s. Remember, we're now talking about what? Is this the 5th displacement? When you think about all the lost culture and the spaces, you cannot say that this happened there or this happened there. You have to realize that the erasure is about the displacement. You can't gain generational wealth if you're constantly being moved. So this is a little more about the Great Migration, or the Great Escape, like I call it. And it's basically, like I said, from 1915 to 1917. So now you have the West. Now the Underground Railroad is like, when I think of the Great Escape, I look at it like the Underground Railroad Part 2. But now everybody's free and everybody's trying to get out of there, the South. And you can see here the map on the top left, and some great pictures of our African American brothers and sisters, our ancestors. Well, some of them will be our seniors now. They came later on. And, moving across the United States of America. And the reason why I don't call it the Great Migration is because that serves the status quo. That serves the community of oppressors and the idea and the white fragility that we can't express it the way we want to. We have to express it the way that makes them feel comfortable. And what makes them feel comfortable is, and this is not for all white people, please be understand. This is not for my Jewish brothers, all my people that came, because at 1915, that's when a lot of the white culture in America, especially in the North, our Jewish brothers and sisters, Italian brothers, the Irish had been here, but for the most part, a lot of Europeans came after 1950, after World War One. So I'm not talking about that group. I'm talking about the groups for the Revolutionary War, right? The Brahmin, the units, having these groups come together and, be trying to keep us down and to be working together to be a unit is something that, we have to, really grasp, if we're going to make any progress moving forward. So the African Americans now have to move because, the communities are being leveled, the multicultural space are being leveled, the gentrification is happening in the North End. And the 12th Street Baptist Church that we saw on Joy Street now moves um, down to the um, down to Lower Roxbury, and also and you now have this. These circles represent the African American communities. This is the Cambridge community called the Coast. I'm going to do some work on them, but not now. I have to do a lot of research, so I'm going to be trying to go down there and get some stories. But nonetheless, this is the Roxbury place, and this is what happened in Roxbury. So they moved down to Roxbury, and we're going to get to what the community. But I want you to know what happened first. So there were some highways that were supposed to be built, I-95 and I-695, through community action on People Before Highways Day. So this is when Mel King, Chuck Turner, and a lot of the African American male leaders and female leaders, Ruth Babson, and the rest of them, they were all fighting. They fought these highways being built. Them with a wide group of people met January 25th, 1969 in Roxbury at the Mass State House. And they were able, and that was day was called People Before Highways Day, right? Community action. 4 years later, 1972, these highways, they stopped building them. But they had already leveled the community before that. This is an illustration of the intersection that was supposed to be at, right there by Northeastern. It's the train track. So this is the orange line. All right. So this is the orange line right here. So this is like Ruggles. And this is like Madison Park. All right. So this was supposed to be there. This isn't there. This is actually this right here is the inner loop. So that's around here, right? So if you're going on I-93 and you look to your right, you'll see this is the ramp to nowhere. But it wasn't the ramp to nowhere. It was the ramp to Roxbury, because you would have gone down this lane and gone down to Roxbury. All right. So they destroyed that community, and this is the area. This is where Madison Park Technical Vocational School is. You can see that's the track right there. This orange space and the red spaces are the community places that were leveled to the ground so that they could, build what's there now. This is just a little bit more. That's Cotta Playground over here, Tremont Street. This is actually, and I want to big up my main man, Adam Susanek, from Segregation to Design. Bro, you are the best. Without you, I don't even know what I'd do, because he got all these like aerial photos and all this other stuff. So follow Segregation by Design on Instagram. This is Madison Park. So that's the original Madison Park. This is what it looked like. This is where people met. People had fun. They had games. They had other things. They were also playing like Negro League baseball games here, exhibition games. So all this area here was the African American community, and it was all leveled to the ground. This is Technical Vocational School. This is the field. This is Vernon Street. Oh my God, I can't even tell you. I wish I could have gone on Vernon Street. Vernon Street was kind of like the African American highway, where like this is Dudley, so this is like kind of like where the multicultural, but this is like where everybody hung out. And they leveled schools. They leveled they leveled schools. They leveled homes. They leveled YMCA. They leveled, things that you think that were vital. They leveled the whole thing, and they were warned by the Boston Redevelopment Agency, which is like the version of the BPDA, the Boston Planning Development Agency that's today. That don't do this. Look what happened in the West End. It's the worst, right? They still went ahead, bro. So this is a little bit about that. And like I said, they knocked down a lot of great stuff. This is the Mishkan Tefillah church, as you can see here, right? The congregation. This is like 1899, where African Americans were still in the West End, and then they moved down to here by 1930. Well, there's actually one earlier, but they moved around 1906, and this you can see here, the same place, but now this is the 12th Street Baptist Church. This is where he met the lovely Coretta Scott King. This is what it looks like now, right? This is the Residence Inn. This is the love story mural that's on the back end of this building. And this is, this, if you look here, you can recognize the Embrace statue. This is the picture that it was based on. But literally, such an important cultural landmark, an old Jewish temple that I have actually spoken to somebody. She's 86 years old. She was in it. And she said it was elaborately decorated with gold leafing, a fantastic strong staircase. This cultural landmark is gone for this. I ain't gonna talk about it. No offense, residents in, but it's just a like a matchbox. It's just like a Legos, right? It just has no culture. This is what's there instead for the place where the good Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King met his soulmate, and together they changed the world. I mean, let's think about how much money that would bring into our community because people would be wanting to come and actually see the place. Just like they go see Faneuil Hall. And that's what is so important about that area. But it's gone. It's literally the highway. It was supposed to be a highway and it got knocked down. So now they put that up there. Right? They took away so many spaces. And I'm going to just quickly go over here. But this is Alan Rohan Crite, an African American painter. Now, me, you know, I'm an engineer. I'm not a big guy for painting and all this art stuff, although he changed me. And that's why I have this art. We commissioned this Rise Above Redlining portrait. Shout out to Canvas Studios, Daphne Walker for doing such a beautiful job. I love Eve. That's the name of the lady there. And what he did for me, because you see back then, you see when you have underserved communities, there are not a lot of pictures. There is an archive. If you want to go check it out, it's called the Lower Roxbury Project from Northeastern. Shout out to the service learning team at Northeastern that helps me do a lot of research on this stuff. And there just weren't any real pictures. I mean, I've gone to the Boston archives to look for pictures. All I saw was like pictures of, them trying to show how the place needs to be destroyed by urban renewals. They'll take pictures of some really nasty looking spaces in the African American community. But there was so much more. There were dentist offices, there were doctors, there were lawyers, there were uppity black people. I interviewed a 100-year-old resident of Roxbury. I want to send my love to Reverend Chauncey Moore, who is still alive in Roxbury, and he told me about the uppity black folk. Can you imagine we had the audacity to be arrogant and uppity? And I think, one thing about, equity, I think, we don't have to be perfect. We can be arrogant. Like, why can't we be arrogant? Why can't we be mad? Aren't those human emotions? Right? Why can't we be happy and and other, like it's not just, equity isn't just being like we have to have the freedom to be even extravagant or be whatever, And I think, when you see these schools, this is called Back to School. This is a parade that African Americans used to have on Hammond Street. This is actually this picture is called Madison Park at Dark. And that's why I put it next to the technical vocational school, because this is all that's left. Just a civic institution, a school that, yes, it's good, but it's actually one of the more, it's a huge place. And it's all we got. And I don't want to like downplay. There's a lot of hard working, I used to work for Boston Public Schools for a little bit there. And, I know the hardworking teachers that are trying to, slip in the Black history when they can. But, it's just difficult when you have a curriculum that is not designed. So please, hey, this is why you got to support the Afro American Academy, because we're out here doing this work. Y'all be complaining that your history is being lost. But we also need you to support us. Not watch this video, share, but also donate your time and your resources, because this Black history is not going to just come out of the sky. And nobody can write this history but us. So I hope you appreciate some of this quality research that we've done here. This here is, so that's the Reverend Vinnie Haynes with a local African American leader. And his family actually owned a home in this community. That was nothing. There were homeowners all along Mass Ave. You can see these communities here. These are brownstones, and this is the African American community, and they're not renting all of them, right? These are kids playing in the streets. This is a scene here. This is, I love this. Like I said, segregation by design. I don't know what I would do with them. These are some existing buildings that you can see here today. Right? Y'all know that hotel. And this is Dudley Street. This is back in the day. So Dudley Street used to go all the way through. This is the elevated rail, what is, well, moved down to Roxbury Crossing. Well, this was the orange line. So this is down to Forest Hills. And the trolley lines go down here to Mattapan and Grove Hall. And this is the Dudley Street Baptist Church. It was originally a white church, but eventually when the demographics changed, became an African American church. And this Dudley Baptist Church, you can see this is the police station. This is the Roxbury Public Library. Shout out to all my people, Akuna, Mr. Knight, all my people in BPL. We love you, respect you. Thank you so much for all the work you do to help us get a free space every now and then to educate our community. And there's a courthouse there, But one of the gripes I have with the BPL is that there is no, you do not see this church there. You do not see a picture of this church. There's no way to know, right? There, this is where they have that statue of the general, and there's no mention of this community there. And I think that that's a shame, right? That's a big shame. So then, of course, they knocked that down. They knocked churches down. They've knocked spaces down. They've knocked, schools down. Communities were erased. And now the fun part. So this community was funded because it was part of the Chitlin Circuit. So the part towards Mass Ave was more about entertainment and music. And as you went down Tremont Street, which was kind of like the Hanover or the Newberry, the main strip of the so like the African American downtown, the main strip of the African American cultural hub, the African American Chinatown, if you want to say it like that. But and this was the Jazz Square. And like I tell my young people that I teach, oh my goodness, y'all have never been to a space, sort of like Bourbon Street in New Orleans or something, right? Where it's all African American jazz clubs. It's not some, it's not a little bit, it's a whole cluster. And that's what's missing today in Boston. A place where so what we see are culture that comes from here being represented. Right? I know some friends of mine who are African American freedmen, and you can feel the pain of them feeling drowned out, that they don't have a space that really, not one statue, one African American business, but a whole community, And of course, it was built on our ability to be the best musicians that God has ever created. Right? And this is Wally's Jazz Cafe. It was formerly known. This is when it was across the street from where it is now. And it was called Wally's Paradise. And this is my good friends, and this is why we're doing it at our event next week at Wally's Paradise, is because, as you know, this community was destroyed. So the last grain of sand, this is family owned. So this is what I mean by generational knowledge creates generational wealth. Because you have to have generational businesses. And if you ever go there and watch Frank and Paul do their thing, you can tell they've been doing this work since they were kids. And, I always say, my brothers and sisters that you're opening restaurants, or you go to an African American restaurant or any restaurant, right? You go to a Jamaican restaurant, Haitian restaurant, you like, oh man, the service is so this, the service is so that. I'm not saying that in every case, but for a lot of cases, right? This is their first generation. It's like I always tell people, what don't we know that we need to know? Culture is here to solve problems. So if we don't know some of this stuff, we can't solve our problems. And if our problem is to have a restaurant that is, the service what about if it takes more than one generation to actually get that whole thing down, right? How about that? You never know, right? But that's how it works, right? You need to maybe get, and you can see it when they work. They've been doing this since they were young people, and they know everything. Like, it's clockwork. So shout out to Frank, shout out to Miss Eleanor, and their whole family for just, really embracing the work that we do here at the African American Cabinet, always creating space, and we need you to go down there and check them out, right? They got bands all year round. 365, so check out Wally's Jazz Cafe. I just put some other pictures around there. I wanted to make sure I talk about Mel King. Oh my God. So this is like during the tent city, another, so when the gentrification was starting, obviously they're trying to develop, like the Prudential and all this other place, and looking at like where African Americans are staying in Tent City and all this other place and saying, y'all need to get out of here, right? So African Americans was all the way up there, and they were trying to like push them back. I often call it the Boston Trail of Tears. This, like, 60-year cycle of displacement, right, in Boston. So, yeah, that's it. 60 years later, in the 1960s, African Americans were destroyed. You can see here. Oh, and then the music. Let's talk about the music real quick. This is some pictures of the hi-hat, which is right there in Jazz Square. This is the picture of, and that's a picture of inside the hi-hat. This is from the Lower Roxbury Project. Like I said, shout out Northeastern. And then we got Miles Davis here at the hi-hat. I mean, because now one thing you have to remember, there were a lot of businesses. Hotels was a big business. Why? Because, if y'all know anything about the Green Book and the Chitlin Circuit, people are coming in from the South, y'all, and they're coming to Boston to play. They're going to New York, all these places. So, but remember, after you play downtown, right, for the white folks, you can't actually come down. You can't stay there. You gotta leave. You gotta come back to your community. So when they come back to the community, guess what, yo? They was like, I mean, they were actually like real events, but there was also them just, they're in their hotel and they just want to hang out and meet up with the community. Imagine that. So James Brown would just show up at Connolly's and, all kinds of crazy stuff. This is a picture of Slades, which was actually in the Green Book. And slaves, this is Bill Russell. Bill Russell now began to own slaves at the time. And this is the late great Muhammad Ali in front of slaves on Tremont. Like I said, from Mass Ave to Tremont, it was entertainment, right? And I also want to say that it wasn't just about entertainment. African Americans were doing a lot of stuff, and they were making a more than you would expect amount of money because of segregation and racism, they would not fully disclose what they made. They were putting the money under the mattress. And a good historical note, now that we're living in a world where all the stock exchange is all going back since the 1930s, right? Because of certain ideologies that have taken over the White House. You're talking about, the erasure of a community, right? And, you're talking about um, that during the 1930s, right? The Great Depression, African Americans were actually immune to it. And it was because we kept our money under the thing. So while people were jumping out of buildings because of the stock market had crashed, because they lost everything, we didn't have that problem because all our money wasn't in the stock market. Okay, in fact, we are credited with saving forward, and that's why we like Cadillac so much, because after the Great Depression, it took that, and that's kind of what happened. What always had people, the status quo had to be forced into selling because they had nobody would buy. The white people didn't have no money, so now they started marketing for the first time. So they were marketing Cadillacs, but they weren't marketing to black people. Then they started marketing to black people, and black people had money, so they started buying them. Black people own homes up and down Mass Ave, those brownstones that are worth millions today. And this anchor is very important. I say at this time, that is the anchor. If those communities were allowed to stay, the displacement would have been stopped. There would be no displacement like what we're talking about today, mass displacement. We're not talking about one. People always get displaced. This is a natural fact. Develop an area, property values go up, people get displaced. But we're talking about mass displacement. We're not talking about like something unnatural, okay? And that's where we come to the next part of our story. So, many people know that Roxbury had a strong Jewish presence. They owned a lot of places, and there was an allyship shared because of we have the same cultural artifact of discrimination, hatred, and mass murder inflicted in front of on our people, right? We understand how it feels when crimes of humanity are done to us. Now, not all Jewish people, just like not all African Americans were feeling comfortable with Jewish people. In fact, that was actually a big rift back then because see, a lot of the Southerners had come up from the South, and then the black folks that were here that were like, "Hey, look, we got white friends," and they're like, "No, you can't trust them." And I don't blame them, but they didn't know about the Frederick Douglasses and all the camaraderie, the North End. They had never seen anything like this. So you have to be really, these are people that are really running away. So people don't know that northern Dorchester, Roxbury, all that area down Warren, all the way to Blue Hill Ave, all the way down to Talbot, all the way down to Mattapan was predominantly Jewish. One of the largest Jewish communities outside of Europe that has ever, well, apart from like New York and things like that. But you get what I'm saying, right? And they built lovely communities, and a good portion of them were giving jobs, were giving respect, were supporting, were mentoring. I've actually talked to an African American lady that said her first job was with a Jewish butcher, and every weekend that butcher would give her meat to take home to her family. And back then, with the kind of food insecurity, that meat was like a blessing for their family. So I want to recognize my Jewish brothers and sisters and recognize the love and allyship that transcended not just mere words. We're talking about the freedom riders. We're talking about a Jewish community that gave blood, the blood, like our Native American brothers and sisters. I didn't even mention that Crispus Attucks was mixed race. He was Native American and African American. So the blood of our allies, we want to make sure that we recognize them always. And we have to like try to rekindle this out of respect for the ancestors that were kind, they were human, they were loving, they were compassionate, and they gave everything. They were willing to fight, not just talk. Now listen up, white liberals. Not just talk and be concerned and look for measurable outcomes, but to actually be ready to roll up your sleeves. But I know now that you see the Confederates are in power, you guys have changed it too. You now realize that they call you N-word lovers now, and you can see how N-word lovers are treated, right? A lot of white people got killed mercilessly during the Underground Railroad, during all the displacement. We've always had allies that don't look like us, but in their hearts they are like us, and they care. They don't know, they don't have to dance, they don't have a little seasoning in their food, but they all right. They're good people. So but something happened here, y'all, and I'm going to talk about it on the next slide. But it's called the Beeburg area. So African American and Jewish Americans were kind of getting together, like I said, the rabbi that was very close to the good Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. You see him on the marches and everything like that. That unity was actually used against us, and we were pitted against each other's by the white elite, white and Irish elite at the time, and because the idea was that because we were such good friends, we should live together. The niggers and the Jews gotta live together, and that's what they did. But now they put this area and drew a line around that area that we inhabited together, and then removed all the infrastructure and watched the place starve and atrophy from no money. Franklin Park Zoo now goes down. There are foreclosures all over the 60s and 70s and 80s. Well, the 70s and 80s, sorry. Right? And these are the things that happen. Remember, the Redline, the urban renewal happens, and then the effects start taking place in the 70s. Some are good, like hip hop gets invented in the ghettos because there are no more hi-hats and places to hang out at, right? There are no more places there are no more churches to learn how to play our instruments. But then that's also when the welfare state starts. That's when they start encouraging and breaking up our families. Remember, I mean, you had, Black Panther Party that started in those communities of the 50s and 60s and, during the civil rights era, we have the Black Panther Party that gave the first school lunch. Those were communities. People were working together. People were meeting. People were galvanized. They were having rent parties. You couldn't pay the rent. All your friends came and they started putting money together so that you could get your rent going. That's the kind of communities that got knocked down. And they started spreading down, Warren, going down, and that was what called North Dorchester, which was cold. There was actually nothing called North Dorchester, but North Dorchester meant where the black part of Dorchester. And this is some great photos. I want to big a shout out to my the main lady when it comes to Boston history, Boston Urban Archives, Ebony Gill. She provided some of this research. So I want to make sure I send a shout out to her and the Boston Workers Circle. This is the tour. The roadmap to beloved community. We got 3 tours, y'all. We got the New Granny Joy, the Once Upon a Time in Nubian Square. We got the roadmap to beloved community. So, yeah, check those out. But this is what happened. And I really want to, really kind of go a little bit deep here. This is the Redline map that was issued February 1st, 1938. So this is a snapshot of 1938, right? Technically 1937, but this is when the survey was done. It was just issued February 1st, 1938. And this is what the Beberg area that I pointed out that they just made a big circle around, right? And this area, right, all these areas kind of were high in price and value. So they formed, and they were like racial covenants, which were, like these like clauses in the deeds that said, hey, you can't rent and own to any black people, any Asian people. And I've even seen some that said, no, you can't rent to Jewish people. All right. So you can see that this is the north end, and that was redlined, and then the west end that was redlined. So you see that the redline map is a cultural diversity map. Okay, the yellow parts are usually where the just white immigrants are. So that's why you have Jewish Dorchester and all this other here, and of course Jewish people are here. Where you see red is also African American, but it also can be mixed. So like over here in like Roxbury Crossing, Mission Hill, it was kind of mixed, but mostly Irish. So remember, Irish people got it, the Italians got it, any multicultural spaces got it. They got leveled to the ground or they got gentrified. Now, I want you to look, this is the 1938 map. Now, this is a 2005 map that was released by the city of Boston last month, March 19th, after the State of the City. I want to set a big shout out to all my people in BPDA, all the city councilors, all everybody in the Boston City Hall that does this work, the affordable housing people, CDCs, all the groups, because everyone is working extremely hard, but just the resources are not there. And in essence, this is a displacement map, y'all. And the more purple it is, means the higher rate of displacement you're gonna have. And that's why this is very serious. And if anybody thinks, remember when I said how redlining is not of the past, right? It's something that's actually present. Let me prove it to you, okay? So this is a map from 1938. Look at East Boston. There are other places, but this is really clear. Look at East Boston. Look at the shape of this red line area from 1938. And now let's go over here. See anything similar? Right? Down there, right? And this is why redlining still exists today. So it doesn't matter, right? And if I tell you the truth, this North End has the East Boston, according to the city's data. It's not my data, right? But I told y'all didn't want me to have that data, because if you give me that data, I'm going to tell all y'all business. And this says they have the highest level of displacement up to 97% of what of maximum, so the highest it can go, it's at 97%, y'all, and of maximum displacement. And that's by the city's data. So that means that, I mean, it has got the highest level in Boston of the highest of displacement. And it literally looks exactly the same. And the reason why, well, the economic pressure is from Charlestown. See, Charlestown had some redlining in there, but ooh, it's all clean now. That means it's all cleaned up. It's gentrified, right? And then this is where the pressure is, and they've been pushing African Americans down from Tent City and everywhere. And this is where we are now. This is a mostly like Latin American and Hispanic community, and this is African American. This is Roxbury, right? So you see that the displacement, where the people with the highest risk of displacement are right here, all right? And this is what the issue is now. So now this area has been disinvested from, because remember, they moved all the trolleys. We're going to get into it a little bit more. But they removed all the trolleys. They disinvested, so it's cheaper. All the people who can't afford stuff move there. And then after a while, capitalism wants to come in because it's cheap and buy it, and or put in infrastructure. So what kind of infrastructure are we talking about? What about White Stadium, right? So White Stadium, now I'm very clear. I'm an engineer. I want development. Build, build, build. But the problem is that when you build in areas like this that are already underserved, that their property values are low. The reason why their property value is low is because you disinvested in the area. In fact, disinvestment is not really, it's not disinvestment. Don't let them whitewash that. It is, they destroyed the area, removed they identified an area, and they removed all the money that could get to Franklin Park. Because y'all know there ain't no way to get to Franklin Park unless you take the free 28. And I don't know if you've been on the free 28, but the people on the free 28 don't want to take the free 28, let alone any tourists. So they took away the trolleys down Seaver, down Warren, and at the end of the day, this area now is cheap, but it's not supposed to be cheap. It's part of the Emerald Necklace, all those, the Boston Common, and you now have a place. If you go around, just go by Siva, take the right by that big, the old temple, the Jewish temple there. Go up into that community. See if you look at the buildings. Look at them well. And close your eyes and pretend you're not in Dorchester. And you will think that, well, this could definitely be Brookline. This could definitely be Comm Ave and Boylston or wherever. You will see that the area is actually designed for rich folks that lived around the largest landmark in Boston's history. We're talking about Franklin Park. It's got a zoo. It's got a golf course. Huge green spaces. It was built by the same guy who built Central Park. Or designed, sorry, Architect Olmsted. Shout out Architect Olmsted, right? And this area, if you put White Stadium, and if people don't know, White Stadium is a historic it has a lot of African American significance. Like I told you, during was where James Brown, they put a good jumbotron. That's where James Brown saved Boston, because people were listening to that instead of rioting, right? They're going to upgrade it and put in like a women's a major league team, I believe. But basically a professional franchise. Of course, if it's done up, they're going to be concerts. Billions and millions are going to be coming into this community that now is underserved. So once you put any investment into these communities that are low artificially, they're going to go to their natural point quickly. And it's going to be too fast. The area is hypersensitive to investment, and the people are going to be displaced. So that White Stadium, I have no problem with building. If people want to build, go ahead and build. But you can't have it both ways. If you build, you better start looking for how you're going to be helping people from being displaced, because that is a nuclear bomb. That is a Hiroshima of displacement. If you ask me what's the best way to get all these people out so I can gentrify the area, the first thing I'll say is that you got to put a big placeholder. And let's wait 10, 15 years for the place to bring up the property value so fast. And if you don't, that people get displaced, and if you don't believe me, I'm going to tell you what they're trying to do to get there, right? You all know that they put that bus rapid lane down Columbus, from Roxbury down Columbus, going down Eggleston Square and hitting up Franklin Park. You know they did that. They did that so that you can get from the Orange Line to this new stadium if you want to go to a concert or go watch a soccer game. And they're fixing the other way. They're connecting the red line to the area. That's what the action plan. We're going to get to that later. But that's what happened. And that's why it's so important for everybody to get involved and to understand the history so that it would not repeat itself. You don't know, if you don't know where you're coming from, you can't know where you're going. And since we know that this is going to be displaced, we have to hold people accountable so they are making sure. You better buy some luggage, and you better buy some you better get some U-Haul credit from the city, because let me tell you what, y'all need to, and I'm telling this to all my community members out here. Listen to me seriously. This coming from the heart. If you're gonna go, look at how much you're making and look at what it is now. If you're struggling with your rent, you better find a way to get out on your own terms. Because if you gotta go, you better go. You might as well go on your own terms. Don't go because you ain't got no rent. You can't make it. It's the cost is too high. The inflation. You know the tariffs is coming. And if you know you can, you better get out while you can. All right. If you own property in that area, do not sell. Fine. If you want to make money off it, you want to move somewhere, that's fine. Get a property manager. Let them take over your space. Get a rental property, and they give you some money. You get equity. Go get another place. Move wherever you want to go. But don't sell, because the property value is about to skyrocket. They're calling people up. And remember, I'm talking to my homeowners, because you guys are the anchors. You actually own property, not a renter. So we need you to stay in place. Otherwise, the renters don't have any leaders, or nobody's going to own a business, or or lead the community, right? Or advocate for the community. So we need you to stay there. You don't sell, all right? Find somebody to get equity and use the money to do whatever you need to do, but do not sell, because you would be selling yourself short. If the property value is about to go way up, so the realtors are calling you, hey, come on by. They're trying to give you just the much as you'll take to say yes, because they know whatever you agree to is going to be 4 or 5 times that in about 10, 15 years. So they're just going to give you what they're just trying to get you out. So don't do it. Don't fall for the okie doke. All right. So this is some of the trolleys that used to be in Boston. This is actually Blue Hill Ave. You can see this is heading down to Mattapan, and I'm heading up to Mattapan. Right. Y'all know what I'm talking about if y'all from Boston. And then this is the wall, by this is kind of by that theater, right? Over there by Stashes. So, and this is the trolley tracks right down the middle. So that's what they're trying to fix now. They're trying to reconnect the Mattapan station, right? And let it go all the way to down. They're not, because they're just doing the first half, which is going to go down to Grove Hall. And as y'all know, you just take the left there on Siva, and go down to and you're in Franklin Park. So they're trying to, so that if you want to get to the White Stadium from the red line, you have an easy way to get there. Because remember, redlining, a lot of it is just, we need to get somewhere. We just don't want to be involved with all the black people and the people of color, people of culture along the way. So we just want to get there quickly. So that's what I see, right? And just to give you a little demographics, these are the T lines, and this is the Beeburg area superimposed. You can see this whole area is empty. This is where the most children, 0 to 17, live in Boston, in that area, and there's no T. So how do they get to school? You got to take the free 28 on Uber. In Boston we say Uber. So don't mind me. I've been here so long. All right. And then, this is more about that transportation action plan. Like I said, you can see here, this is the current orange line, right? This is like, then this is the old orange line down Washington. And this is the proposed upgrade, although they're just talking about this red. And this is a former trolley line leading from there. And this is where they want to fix right? And this is where White Stadium is. So they're just trying to connect here, connect here. They've got the down Columbus that, and this, my good friends, is the old one of the old trolley line maps. And I just want to quickly show you how connected it was because this is right here. So when you come down here, this is Mattapan. This is the Cummings Highway. This is the trolley line. You know they're doing that reconstruction there. So they're trying to connect here. And then this is Ashmont over here. This is Franklin Park. This is Forest Hills. So they're just trying. This is how connected. This is down Talbot Ave. Look at over here, y'all. Talbot Ave. Look at trolleys, trains running down Talbot Ave, running down Blue Hill, all over the place. Look at them, all over the place. And now, like I showed you, if you go back to that last slide, there's nothing. If you this is where you gotta go, you know, be there or be square, brother. All right. Okay. And that leads me to lastly, but not least, but Hyde Park. Okay. And Hyde Park is a unique community. Going back to my map over there, go back one more. Ooh, a lot of maps. So if you go down to Hyde Park, right? So what's happening is you can see is that this is the Boston Trail of Tears that I was telling you guys about later. So African Americans, remember, we're in the North End. We get pushed here. Well, first, let's start at the beginning. We came from Africa, got put here. When we got pushed out, we got 60 years later, where we got pushed out, and then we come to the West End. 60 years later, we get pushed out. We move down here. And then we've been pushed down. So the Trail of Tears is just going this way, going southwards, and pushing African Americans and people of color out. All right. Now, I showed you that highway that was supposed to be built here. And what that means is that there was supposed to be economic pressure coming from here, right? Because there's a highway, right? So there's a taller, if it was built, there would have been taller buildings, all sorts of stuff there, right? And then that means that the economic pressure would have made this place much more valuable. Remember, add value. And then it would have been too expensive and kept black people from on closer to Mattapan. But black people are moving down here, and people of culture are moving down here, and now they're kind of pressed up against Mattapan. Milton is super rich. Okay, that's Milton over here. All right, Milton, as you can see in the Redline map, is green, so this means they're rich. This is all the green spots are just Brookline and Milton. All the rest is yellow, right? And then they're up against the Neponset River, which is holding the redlining and the poverty in Boston. And Milton is like literally, it's like a 1 minute walk. You go from poverty to riches. But it's pushing people down here into Hyde Park. And Hyde Park now is probably one of the closest examples to what African American communities were like in Roxbury and Mass Ave, because you have you have upper class, middle class, and working class African Americans and people of culture living in the same community, like a village, right? Not all communities. In fact, none of the communities back then were just poor. In fact, far from it. They were all different strata. Like I said, Reverend Chauncey said, the uppity black folks, you know. So basically, Hyde Park got some uppity black folks. I know a few. I ain't saying no names. But anyway, long story short, this is the commuter rail. Forest Hills is like down there. You can see the city of Boston. This would have gone all the way to Back Bay. And this I-95 route, right, that was there. Because it wasn't built, this area is preserved, right? It is literally probably the only example of this African American, this properly balanced, naturally occurring African American communities. It is outside of the Beeburg area and Mattapan, so it's still wholesome. The property values behind African Americans were able to buy into that location, the ones that could afford it anyway. And then, so basically, Hyde Park has a lot more, probably some of the best upwardly mobile. We have a lot of great people. Ayanna Presley lives out here. I think he married Paris. From Embrace Boston lives out here. I think Shekomi Dou from Beckma and Office of Black, a lot of prominent African Americans live out here in Hyde Park. In Hyde Park! And a lot of, so the displacement, the sixth displacement is happening now. 60 years has passed since the 60s, and our communities are being pushed to Brockton, Stoughton, Fall River, you know, south, some southern smaller cities in Massachusetts. In fact, I'm actively searching out some interviews for the Redline Power Narrative podcast, so check us out. Because I need to get the stories. We need to tell the stories of people who just couldn't afford to live in Boston. But I believe that once a Bostonian, always a Bostonian. And it's important that we learn from our mistakes and do what we can to keep people in place. White Stadium has to pay for people to stay there. Otherwise, you're going to replace those people with white people in the next 15 to 20 years. Is that what we really want, Boston? We want another location like the New Guinea Settlement or Cop Hill Cemetery or the West End, Beacon Hill. We want to look at SOWA, south of Washington. We want to look at even, and this gentrification, it's not just black people, because see, I did talk about the red line map being a cultural diversity map, but it's also a class map. If you go to the South Boston, which used to be Irish, it is not Irish. It's like white on white gentrification, bro. It's now yuppies. Apparently, they have more like yuppies. So what I mean by yuppies is people right out of college, dinks, double income, no kids. They've got they just got out of college. They're starting want to work downtown, so they're close by. So they have more dog parks than kid parks, family parks in South Boston now, right? So I guess that's been the dogs have gentrified the kids. I don't know how that works. But basically, South Boston is no longer Irish. You don't hear all the Boston accents, the Irish accents. You hear, people, a lot of these rich yuppies. So that we don't want that to happen to Hyde Park. We don't want that to happen we want to keep our communities in the southern parts of Boston around Franklin Park, the parts that Franklin Park feeds. We need it to remain the way it is. We don't want to have another mass displacement, and in 10, 15 years out, we'll have Redline Narratives documentary part 5, where we're now talking about the last displacement, number 6, until we get another 60 years past, and then we're displaced from wherever we end up. We can't have that. And I'm like I said, so I want development. We need to think of some more solutions to raise money. This is a federal issue. That's why this is an I-95. I-95 caused this 60 years ago, and it's just a ripple effect ever since then. So I want us all to educate yourself, right? You got to learn the real stories, because I got another podcast coming where we're going to go through some terms, because some of these terms are so whitewashed. You think affordable is affordable. But let me tell you what, honey. Let me tell you something, child. Let me tell you something, sugar. It's a bunch of BS. It's unaffordable housing. That's what I call it now. Because that affordable housing can be up to 90-something grand. And so I don't know. It's affordable for who? I guess the people that they building them bike lanes for. Speak on it. So, right? I want to thank everyone. We're kind of at the end, but I do want to talk a little bit about the Afro-American culture. I hope you enjoyed it so far, because I've been enjoying doing this. But let me take some time to talk a little bit about the Afro-American Culture Initiative and what we're going through. Now, I put this up. In fact, somebody said, don't be so political. This is not political. This is cultural. This is not about race. This is about culture. This is not about all black people. This is about African Americans, freedmen. So, that Joy Street, the Museum of African American History, losing funding. We have lost funding from last year. Of course, they say, well, how do you know it's from the Trump? Well, there's no way to know. But if all I have to say is that the Afro-American Academy, as great as we are, we ain't no African American Museum of History that Frederick Douglass and the 12th Street Baptist Church and all the history that has come from it including allowing Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King to preach in Roxbury, and then as a result, segregation and all the other laws were outlawed. If they can't are immune, then you know the African American Academy doesn't stand a chance. So we're asking everyone. Y'all know me. I'm not one to be asking anybody for anything, but the actual truth is that we're going to have to emulate what our ancestors and our seniors did in the 60s. We have to come together. Back then, they had freedom houses. They had schools, private schools for African Americans, where the uppity black folks send their uppity kids so they could learn uppity things. I don't know. And we are learning that history and trying to emulate and reproduce. I always tell my students, there's nothing new under the sun. Our job in this story, our job in this narrative is to do old things in new ways, right? Solve these old problems in the new ways. We're still dealing with hatred. We're still dealing with ideology of the Confederacy. We're still dealing with the legacy of Jim Crow and segregation, and we're definitely still living with an unconstitutional design. We're still of our city. We're still living in the wake and the shadows of the destroyed community of Roxbury, the gentrified community of the Riverside Coast and Cambridge, because we can't go there and learn anything from it. So the only way is to do this kind of research and to create this cultural space and to advocate for more cultural infrastructure so that we can show our children who they are and where they stand in the struggle, to quote the late, great Bob Marley. Boy, I mean, it's really personal for me. Because you see these youth, there's youth in there that have been with me for 3-4 years. They're now in college. And, you develop relationships and you teach them things and you see their eyes sparkle when they've heard something that they knew they wanted to know, but they didn't know where to get it. Because BPS, y'all, ain't gonna do it. In fact, let me tell y'all something. BPS doesn't teach about the desegregation of BPS. I repeat, the Boston Public School System doesn't teach about, it doesn't teach about let me say that again. It's so emotional, I tell you. The Boston Public School system, the Boston Public School System does not teach the history of the desegregation of Boston Public Schools in Boston Public Schools. That's why it's so important what we do here at the African American Academy. But we can't do this without your support, without you sharing, without you watching, without you liking, without you sending your kids to us. And we appreciate all the parents that is out there. Without funding that we've lost, maybe, this may be in jeopardy. We're pushing. We're going to do it. But we know we're going to do it with your help. And so please, you know what to do. Send a donation, whatever you've got. But I'm not begging for me or my business or my nonprofit organization or anything. I'm begging for these young people that are dying for this work. Some of these kids are in Metco. Some of these kids in Metco go all their whole school history and never have an African American teacher. Check out my youth podcast. All right. Follow at Chop It Up on Instagram podcast. right? You can go to my Afro American one, check it out, and then you can see we have shared posts. Even for African American studies, they didn't have African Americans teaching them. That's harm, y'all. They're representing they're representing the whole race. I am not kidding you. They're answering questions and educating not only their peers, because remember, their peers, this is the first time they're getting to experience any diversity. Their white peers, but they're educating their teachers that also don't, I mean, this is their first experience with it. That is not the job of our students to be teaching grown-ups about things that they don't know. We give workshops to schools, we give tours to schools because we understand that we won't be able to reach all our students because all our students are in white communities and things, and things like that, some of our students. So we've got to go teach those teachers. But guess what? They're not going to teach what we're learning here. What you saw here today is not going to be seen anywhere. And even this very place is completely gentrified that I wanted to do an event in February for my Boston Redline 87 events, Black History Month event series. And it was going to cost me $3,700, y'all. I was like, what? See you later. Bye, Felicia. No, Felicia, don't talk to me. I said bye. Right. And so, I mean, like I said, I just got to keep it real. I just got to keep it real, This, what's happening with the defunding, with the deliberate attacks. I just want to keep it in Boston, but they're trying to remove the slave, some of the slave history from the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C. I was hearing some of the stat. It is literally the most popular of all the museums. Why? Because there is no place to get it. Because like I've shown you, the places have been leveled. There's no space to get it. There is no where Martin Luther King met Coretta. So if you value, especially this tax season, there may not be no Department of Education. I need you to donate your federal tax dollars right here. So we can put it together, a beautiful program. We've created our tours. We're gonna teach our young people our tours. The tours are now going to be, inbred in them, in the bones, baby. And then they're going to be bringing people into our community. They're going to be good on social media so they can attract as many people and amplify their voice as loud as it can get. Because maybe you don't want to listen to me and my gray hairs, but you will listen to those young people. In fact, they're going to do a podcast on D-Day, May 1st, when, the Birmingham, Alabama, come May, right? It's a pivotal moment when SNCC, the student, I forget, oh my God, I think National Christian Coalition. Don't quote me on that. I got a lot of knowledge. I don't remember everything, but the Afro-American Academy is actually modeled after like SNCC and all these youth movements because I realized that we're working hard to pay the bills, all the old grown-ups, we do not have time or we have too much to lose because the reason why people don't know this about the good Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, a lot of people don't know this, not saying nobody knows, but the civil rights movement was about to just die off because he was in jail in the Birmingham when he wrote the letter from Birmingham jail. And they were trying to get the grown-ups to save him and like to protest to get him out. But nobody wanted to do it because you know how it is. If you talk too much, you get blackballed. Afro-American Academy don't get funding from some people because they don't look at you're too woke. Don't let them say that word woke, y'all. Watch my podcast from last week because I don't want to go into too much, but woke is our word. It's a sacred word. It means how we get our freedom, mental freedom. And that's part of what I'm going to ask you, that we need that mental freedom to understand that our organization needs institutions. If you can believe that I can build this institution, please support us. And it's not just me. We got tons of people. We've got teachers. We've got volunteers. We got lots of people behind the scenes that do this work, and we all need your support, right? Well, watch the document. We're doing digital storytelling. We have a documentary, our Redline Narratives, Lost Cultural Hubs of Boston. That's why this is the Redline Narratives podcast. But we actually have a documentary of the same, right? So let's make a heartfelt appeal to anybody out there. Make a donation to the Afro American Summer Project so we can pay our teacher salary, so we can we're looking for space and other things, but so we can give our kids and keep on growing this program. We're also going to be offering tours this summer, so please make sure that and this tour is paid, but we're looking for sponsorships. If you want to sponsor a young person to take the tour, this is not part of our program. There's anybody that wants to take the tours, and if you know anybody that wants to take the tour, if your organization wants to take the tours, let us know, because we've had to do some actual restructuring. When we heard that we lost our funding and we saw what was going on, the attacks on DEI, the erasure of African American culture, they took away. I don't even understand. They removed Jackie Robinson from military service. This is a veteran. You respect African American veterans because they gave when they shouldn't have. They gave when they shouldn't have. Because America didn't deserve it. America broke its promise from day one. The very Constitution is unconstitutional because you can't call me 3/5 of a person and be constitutional. You owe the Constitution. I'm not talking to any human being right now. Because this has nothing to do with any human being alive or dead. We're talking about me and us and Lady Liberty. Us and the very Constitution. The Constitution you owe us. Because you were not even constitutional when you were claiming to be. And let me tell y'all something, that dichotomy, you want to know, how did we get here? How did we get here where we have this craziness going on in Washington, D.C.? Well, it starts with that 3/5 rule, that 3/5 clause, and the fact that the Constitution is by its own writing unconstitutional. So how does that apply to us then? How does your Constitution apply to us? So anyway, let me just get off because I'm like, about to get on one. You know how I get down. So I want to thank everybody. Like I said, once again, I want to give you some updates real quick. So we're going to be giving a presentation about our Lives in Me Heritage program, as well as other programs that we have here, our tours and all the work that we do. And it's going to be at the Bowling Building, April 14th. So we need you to come out and support us. We're going to be talking about some of the crucial work and research and the unique work on research that we're doing here. And then catch us in a month. I'm going to do another podcast on the Culture to Thrive podcast, not in the Redline Narrative. So check me. I got 2 podcasts, y'all. I'm just a podcast king now. And we're going to be doing, I'm just hitting the wrong buttons. Goodness gracious. So we're going to be doing something on to honor. It's actually going to be, I believe, his 100th birthday of the legend Malcolm X, right? So we're going to be doing something on that. So catch us next month. And then next week, we need to see y'all at our fundraiser at Wally's Jazz Cafe. Can't tell you, we're excited. We're going to show the documentary. We're going to we're going to be at Wally's Jazz Cafe, as I said. Live Like a Local tour. My man Colin Knight is giving a tour at 11 o'clock in the morning. So go to the Eventbrite and buy your tickets. So the ticket is really the fundraiser. It's a $50 ticket. And you're going to get, obviously we're going to talk, and I'm going to be doing some data collection. So if you have any stories, bring them out. So like if there are any stories, you think you know the stories until you listen to something from another perspective. I've actually interviewed siblings, and when you hear their stories, it's not exactly the same. So it's good to get different perspectives. We're going to have lunch by Papa B's. It's going to be a great time. So please join us for 57 after Martin. And last but not least, I can't tell you enough. We appreciate all the work that that others do for us, our volunteers, our donors, our sponsors, our stakeholders, our students. I just want to thank everyone for all the work. This has been a Holy Week uprising where I think we need to focus and reflect this Easter on ourselves, where we are in this struggle, learn our past. It's a time of reflection, which is what Easter is about, right? And we're going to be doing it every year. 57 a.m., 58 a.m., 59 a.m., 60 a.m., 60 years after Martin. I hope that we will not be talking about what we're talking about 57 after Martin. But if we don't do the critical thinking and check ourselves every year, then how do we know we're making the progress that we need to make? So once again, support the Afro American Culture Initiative. You say, okay, what's that? That's our government name, y'all. That's our IRS name, Afro American Culture Initiative. That's the government name of the Afro American Academy. And check us out on social media. Our mission is to engineer restorative bridges in underserved multicultural communities. We do research on redlining, urban renewal, African American history, cultural revenue generation. And we are doing everything we can to change the narrative, turn that narrative around this infrastructure. All the equity is based in infrastructure, and I can't express that more enough. I know we care about education, but you can't educate without a school. I know we care about developing skills. You can't develop skills without spaces and instruments and like swimming pools and other things to develop these skills, right? We have a lot of programs. We do the hard work. People have been saying, "Man, you've been doing this forever," blah, 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 but you know what? This is real research work. Like anybody that knows me know I'm not just talking. You may hear it come from me, but there are even young students that have helped me with different elements here and there, and I'm just bringing it all together. I'm the one showing you, but at the end of the day, it's so many people that I'm standing on to get this information out to you, and we're all counting on you, our community. I work in many spaces. I've testified the other day in front of City Hall. We have a development with a displacement team. We're all looking for members. And yeah, we need volunteers for many things. But the development of our displacement team, this team is made of people that do not look like you and me, y'all. All right? These community members, they don't look like us, right? They don't have our problems. They're white folks, right? And I'm probably one of the youngest at that in my group. Like, wow, who are you working with, right? But they do the hard work, and I can't be more thankful and grateful to everybody. Scott, Mimi, Pat, Mary Celeste, the CDC, TN Simpson at High Park Main Streets. I mean, the list goes on and on. And these people do the hard work. Marcia, Kim Jackson, my long lost Lakita. I'm talking about there is so many people that do this work. Oh, but Marcia is black, y'all. We got a few. But for the most part, it just doesn't feel right when I'm fighting for my community, and most of the people, I'm the only one that like understands. I'm like communicating to them like my students communicate to their teachers at MECO, trying to educate them along the way. And they're doing the work. Don't get me wrong. They're the ones fighting and learning the codes. They're the ones looking at all this Article 80s and all this, doing all this research. I do the maps, but they're putting education together for you. But I really wish it was you that did it. I have a young son, and he's in his early 20s, and I always say I'm not going to work harder for you on your life than you are going to work on your life, and that's what we're doing. And nobody can build this future but us, which is why I'm taking it upon myself to say, you know what, I'm an engineer. I can help, I can work, I can do. You've all got skills. We need people in those schools. We need teachers to sign up for our education committee and help us build some, more infrastructure. We need doctors and lawyers and business people to be mentors to our kid and join our education committee so they can build curriculum around the work they do. We need people from other cultures. We need to learn how to make that good Nigerian jollof rice. See how my voice changed. Jesus Christ. Need to learn how to make soup joumou and oxtails and all this other food, and we need that to be in one place. So we ask you to support this organization. I give you my guarantee. There is no research out there like what we're doing. We're completely independent, and we do this work from the heart. We're passionate. We're smart. We're fierce. We're agile and hostile. And we believe in our people, and we believe in our allies, and we believe in Boston. And it's time, all right, to put community before construction. And people before profit. Thank you for watching this super long Redline Narratives podcast. But it is Holy Week Uprising. It is the passing of the Fair Housing Act of 1968 that was passed 7 days after the death of our leader because of the love we had for him and how, yeah, we tore it up. Yeah, we did it. But y'all know that it was deserved because what all the pain and agony we've experienced since then, mass incarceration, voter suppression, and of course, continued displacement. It has to be stopped. We have to work together. We have to build more housing in Boston. We have to make sure that that housing is for the people that can't afford it, not for people who couldn't afford it and just want to move somewhere else. And we have to do it for the African American history so these children will know who they are and where they stand in the struggle. So, once again, I want to thank everyone for for celebrating Holy Week Uprising. We look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you and stay woke. Power to the people.